while we're on the subject of the job market and useful degrees or non-useful degrees, because I think all of us believe and hope that our degrees are useful in some way. We also have a relatively hostile job market. In the past 3 months, we've seen a growing frustration across the world, in Europe, in the United States, with the Occupy Wall Street movement, towards not just the banks, but also toward larger economic issues, including workers' compensation. There was an article in the Varsity regarding the National Union of Students giving its support to a national day of protests. Gerard, can you talk about that for a bit? I mean, will this be effective? Why is NUS supporting this strike? And to an extent, why is CUSU supporting this particular strike?
Well, there are two things happening. There's the demonstration, the march on November 9th, and then there is the UCU, which is the Lecturers Union strike on November 30th. And CUSU, a majority of the colleges which vote at CUSU Council have endorsed both of those things, and the National Union, as you said, is endorsing the demonstration on the 9th. I think it's important that we do go down to London and we march, if only to simply keep awareness up that, you know, students are facing the brunt of cuts, and beyond that, people who are poor are facing the brunt, women are facing the brunt, people from ethnic minorities, and we need to be keeping up the pressure. You know, the government wrote its white paper on the future of higher education, and that was sort of a litany of ill thought out proposals, and we see universities, this university is being scathing about it. We can affect the course of government policy.
Now you mentioned awareness, but is this really going to be effective in changing the policy of the government?
Yeah, I think it could be, because I think it is on the brink of having to do a U-turn like it did with the NHS, and that came about by sustained public criticism of its policy, and it knows its policy is weak.
But do you not think that I went to Stephen Collini's speech last week, and he said that we'd won the argument, that we were right, that the white paper was wrong, it was ill thought out and ill conceived. We'd won the argument, but we were going to lose kind of the battle. So I'm not sure that I'm kind of a lot more pessimistic than you are, I guess.
Yeah, I'd also I think a big fear of a lot of people is that by marching you are necessarily going to create an opportunity for anarchists and such like to join the march, and therefore potentially damage your own cause.
Now here's a question, and that's a very good point. Last year there were multiple protests concerning top-up fees, increases, new loan schemes. The government wanted to push forward. They were successful. It happened in the midst of massive protests, including one protest that got out of hand and Conservative Party headquarters was attacked. The question is for leaders, including the NUS, of these protests and of these movements, how can the organizers prevent the protests from really being hijacked from elements or individuals who may undermine it or who may distract the public from perhaps the real issues or the intended issues of the protesters?
I think it's about firstly having a very strong message, which is uniting the reason why everyone's there, but it's also, and this is where the NUS failed last year, it's also in projecting that message to the media and not allowing it. I think if you bring together any large group of people, you will get a minority who are there, not for the cause, but for their own self-interest. And the task is making sure that the message comes through, that 99% of people were there, were peaceful, they were having a good time, and they really cared about the issues, and that got lost. So it's about projecting that message, and it's about making sure that you're able to do that with clarity. The NUS so far hasn't, but we'll see if they do it this time.
Yeah, I mean, how do you expect things to turn out over this summer? We've been seeing riots, which suggest there's a lot of anger amongst certain sort of parts of the population of the UK. I mean, it's almost inevitable that that's going to be carried through into these protests, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, I want to say pessimistic, but almost I guess that's the realistic view. But I mean there will be thousands of students there who aren't interested in that and who are caring about it, and somehow that message has to get through. I do not condone violence. I unequivocally say that like smashing stuff up damages the student cause, and I really would say to anyone who's thinking of going down for that, you're not helping us. You're not helping our message. You're not helping our cause.
Now TCS came out with an editorial this morning, very critical of you, and it said that you were basically pulling CUSU in a direction they didn't think was wise, that you were not necessarily focusing on the issues that you were elected to, and that you perhaps were politicizing it in a way that did not necessarily reflect the larger interests or sentiments of the students. What do you say to those criticisms?
Well, I'd say firstly that I think, like, I have to make the point that I didn't vote for this. Cousy Council voted for this. The Cousy Council is your elected college representatives and your faculty reps, and they passed this, and they mandated me to now go and carry that out. But I would also say that, you know, it's not in isolation. We're doing lots of other things. You know, that same council said we're going to campaign for a block grant from the university to fund our access stuff, to enhance the welfare schemes that we do. And you know, it's one of the things which I've been tasked to do, and I intend to live up to everything that I promised I would do.
Now, where do you all think this is all coming from? I mean, this is probably part of a larger whole. There's a larger base of either discontent or serious frustration with what's going on. Where do you think this sort of sentiment's coming from? We see it not only here, but we've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in Tokyo. We've seen it in the United States with massive protests. Is it that protesters have become more technologically savvy, or is it that there is in fact a growing groundswell of sentiment regarding the current state of affairs?
I think it's very easy to make a big sweeping statement about everything that's gone on, and so I'm cautious about doing it, but it does feel like something very kind of different is happening. It feels like kind of the Arab Spring and the riots and the student protests and the Occupy Wall Street movement and that's kind of other bits, Occupy London Stock Exchange and all that. That feels like some kind of shift has happened in the past year, and part of it is, I think, that people are more connected, that people can have conversations they previously couldn't have across continents sometimes. You know, you've seen how Occupy Wall Street has gone from one protest in New York to protests across the US, and then protests across the whole of the kind of Western world. And it does feel like there's some kind of awakening, and it feels like what feels very different about this as well is that it feels like a generational awakening. It feels like it's the young who are doing this, and partly because they have the internet that no generations had before, partly because it feels like the young are really being the victims of a kind of big shift in ideology that means that.
Yeah, no, you raised the point that the young are sort of the victims, and most of that has been in sort of the context of talking about debt. Prime Minister Cameron mentioned in the Conservative Party conference speech that this economic crisis was rooted in a debt crisis. I was going to ask you, given the fact that the United Kingdom is a member of the Eurozone, yet not a member of the Euro, and pays into some of these stabilization funds, what are your positions on the Eurozone stabilization and the successive packages that have been either voted on, implemented, or raised vis-a-vis Greece and some of the southern European countries?
I think there's a phrase, throwing good money after bad. Like, I have to admit, I'm a pessimist. I mean, Greece, as a specific example, essentially lied to get into the euro, did not meet the criteria for it having a stable enough economy to be there. It should default. I think it's in the Greek people's blatant self-interest that it defaults. I'm not sure where the euro is heading myself.
Andrew?
I think much the same. I think we've got this generational problem that there are young people in Greece who never asked for this, didn't ask for the austerity that's been imposed as a result of everything that's gone on in the Eurozone. And that's where my ambivalence about it is, because obviously Greece needs to sort itself out. It needs to fulfil the obligations that it has as being part of the euro. But if those obligations need to be met by doing very, very aggressive and extreme cuts and a system of austerity, then I don't really know the answer, but that feels like to me the kind of issue that needs to be solved, and I haven't really solved it.
Vicky, you got the last word.
Oh, good. I would just say that I think it's we're stuck in a vicious circle at the moment. You've got discontent and fear, and with the two working together, you end up in this sort of spiral, and you get stuck. And there's this question of how do you get out of this? And I think what it comes down to is just a level of acceptance. I think that the hard facts have to be faced, and as soon as possible, really.
And now we face the hard fact of running out of time. Thank you for watching, and join us again for a view from the bridge.